some water?
Was that a possibility? It's cool, and we would go down to art class ourselves. I remember wearing your snow pants and taking all that off, and we'd sit on the floor with big canvases and finger paint and all that.
With Charlie Packard.
Mm-hmm. And probably 10, 12 others, and Helen Henley was the art instructor. We didn't have parents taking us anyplace. You just knew where it was and walked on down.
Quite a different time.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I'll just maybe put that here and pick it up then.
Sure.
I need it. Okay.
This is December 2nd, 2011. My name is Mandy Pond. We're here at the Massillon Museum speaking with Carol McConnell. So, Carol, if you could start by telling us where you were born.
Right here in Massillon, 1935, which makes me be 77 next month. I'm going to Disneyland to celebrate with Mickey Mouse, so I'll be a happy birthday.
That's great. Are you taking anyone with you?
Oh, I'm going with my daughter and her little ones. They're just at the right age for Disney, 7 and 3. They're ready.
Perfect. Were you born at home, or were you born in
No, I'm
hospital?
not that old. I did get to the hospital. I was the last of 9 children, and my dad was a dentist here in town. And unfortunately, I had 8 brothers and sisters, and as of last month, we're down to 1 brother. They all have passed away.
Sorry to hear that. What was your maiden name?
Gardner, Dr. Gardner's children.
And what was your father's name?
He went by Dr. A.P. Gardner. Albert was his real name. He always signed things Dr. A.P. Gardner.
You said he was a dentist?
Right, right.
Okay.
My 2 brothers ended up being dentists, and my son is the oral surgeon, so we kind of kept it in the family. Right.
And where was his office?
My dad's office was in the First National Bank building on the 2nd floor. And his name was up there after he passed away for the next 2 years. I thought, what are they ever going to take his name off the window? He did dentistry 54 years. He was going down there in his 80s.
Wow. Is there anything in particular you remember about his office? Did you ever visit? Or?
Oh, I go down quite often, and he had just a regular sized waiting room, 2 chairs, and the old-fashioned drill with the little cords that you could see flying around as they were drilling. And my brother, who became a dentist, he started to work with him because he had the 2 chairs. But that was not a good idea because Bob was left-handed and my father was right-handed. And when you're a left-handed dentist, you need to kind of be on the other side of the patient. So he finally got his own office. But I remember going down quite a bit. I loved the elevator girls, lovely people, and they knew my dad quite well. And they would say, anybody got on the elevator and said, oh, I got a roaring tooth, they'd take me to somebody. They said, we'd take him to Dr. Gardner because we know he'll take care of him. It was cute. And he was very giving. And I've talked to my son Tim about continuing that tradition of helping out those who can't pay for it. And he does. He goes on missions. Tim's been to Haiti lately with doctors to help out, and been to Indian missions. So he's got the bug. Help the others. Mm-hmm.
Great. So you said there were elevator girls.
Yeah, they always had a girl that would kind of run this little gold handle back and forth and tell you who was on what floor. This was before the days of automation. I don't know if the elevator's still there. It probably is. I don't think they'd take it out. It's a bank now. I think it's the Chase Bank building. It used to be First National Bank building.
That's great. So let's talk about your mother. What was her name?
Her name was Claire. Maiden name was Lockenmeyer. She came from a big German family of about 11 children. Unfortunately, her mother passed away when she was 9, so really she was kind of taken care of by her older sisters and, of course, her dad. I never met her mother and dad. Like I never met my father's parents. One of them came to live with us, my grandpa, but my grandmother had passed away on my dad's side. When you're that far down the rank, they're getting older and older. So I only saw a grandfather, and he lived with us for about a year. That's all I can tell you. But my mother was very German. There was a lot of people who, Germans and Irish, married, I think. That was not unusual.
So how far down on the ranks were you in the 8 children?
The very last one, 9. I was number 9. That's a good spot. I always take the last spot on the family.
Goodness.
Parents were kind of mellowed by that time.
And where did you grow up? What was your address?
524 Lincoln Way was a big stucco house. It was turned into 4 apartments when we moved down. And it's kind of deteriorating. It makes me feel bad, and I go by and see the spouting coming down and the window broken. It just makes me feel bad. They tried to fix it up. There was 2 big stairways in the house. And we used to run from one to the other, chasing each other. But they made the one into a separate apartment and took the wall out with the back stairway so that people upstairs couldn't have their own entrance. That was different. We didn't have that entrance there. But it was a fun old house. A lot of memories in there. Big staircase coming down with all these little white pillars and the mahogany on top of it, and sliding down there. That was fun. But as I grew up, well, we had 5 that went off to war. I had 4 brothers and a sister were all in the service, mostly Navy, 1 Marine. And we always had those little blue stars in the window, 5 blue stars, and hoping that you didn't turn any of them gold and didn't lose anybody in the war. In those days, we were all very patriotic. I've lost my feeling of wartime. I don't like wars. I think they're senseless. I'm sorry, but I don't. I hope they all come home. The sooner the better. It's a no-win process of wars. A lot of lives are lost.
So your brothers and sister
Mm-hmm.
served what branches?
It would
of the
be
military?
Second World War.
Mm-hmm.
I could say they were, the 2 boys were in dental school, and the Navy came in and just made lieutenants out of them, finished their college, and then they had to spend 3 or 4 more years in the service. And the big tough guy was Joseph. He joined the Marines right out. He wasn't even finished high school. He took off for the Marine Corps. And let's see, who was the other one? Bob and Jerry and Bill. Fran joined the Waves. She was my sister. This one that just passed away this month, or November. She looked a lot like me. We had a lot in common. My other 2 sisters looked a lot alike. They were like their mother. Frances and I were like our dad. In appearance and personality, I'd say. I'm trying to think who else was in the service. It had to be Bill. Bill was in the Navy too. He was an officer in the Navy.
And so what did you said you were very patriotic. What kinds of things would you do?
Well, back in the 40s, everybody felt the war was justified. And whenever the brothers and sisters would come home on leave or furlough, I'd decorate the banister and have the whole house done in red, white, and blue just to make them feel very welcome home. But it was a long time ago, 42, yeah. It goes back like 60, 70 years.
Did you have a victory garden or?
Oh, yes, we had a victory garden like everybody else. Yeah, we did on the side of the house. We did that. And I remember, I'm so old, I remember we had little coupons, little red tokens to buy certain things that were scarce, like meat and butter and eggs and things. And you took grease back in cans. There was a little grocery store on 6th Street, which is about a 4-minute walk from our house, and we would take cans of grease back to the butcher. Supposedly they used it for ammunition or something. I remember that. And everybody had gas cards to get gas. You had a little sticker in your window. You were an A, B, or C. You got different amounts of gasoline. I think my dad being a dentist, I think he had a fair amount of gas. But I never remember him saying we can't go somewhere too much because we had the gas. It was a time of how different lifestyle to grow up in the 40s. You just made your own friends. You didn't have any play dates set up for you. You just met them at their house and you'd go to the movies or something and you just no one worried if you got back. I said, kid, maybe they didn't want us to get back after 9, but we're here again. We're back home. But I can remember my brother Dave and I were the closest. We used to catch the big bus to Canton when we were like in grade school. And we'd go over to look at WHPC. It was a new radio station then. And they used to let you come in and watch them when they were on the air. And we'd buy these cherry pies, and we'd be sitting there looking through the window, eating our little snacks that we brought with us. And we'd go to Kreisky's, because we didn't have any big stores like they did. And they had sold everything there at Kreisky's. But we would just make a whole day. I came home, nobody said, where have you been? Or, you know, you just did it, and you were home pretty close. We never came late for supper, that's for sure. Wouldn't miss that. We had such a big family that my brother Dave and I, we ate out in the kitchen. And they had a big dining room, but you could only get so many around one table. And it wasn't bad to eat in the kitchen because we had all the leftovers all around us, unfortunately. And we had our own private kitchen area. It was good. But eventually, we got into the dining room when the others began to take off.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a great and big family.
It was. It was a lot of fun.
So what other kinds of activities would you do for fun?
For fun? Let's see, what would we do? Well, I went to St. Joe's grade school, and we always would have paper drives. And those days, you got a wagon, and you'd go from door to door and bring it all down to the school. And there was always steep competition between which grades. It was all stacked in different piles, and you determined your class could bring in the most papers, you know. The truck didn't come until it was all stacked up around the school. Nowadays, you just put it in a little trailer, you know. But in our days, we would go out and bring it in by hand.
Was that for recycling, or was it?
Actually, we got paid for it. The term recycle was not a common word in the 40s.
Okay.
But we would do it as a fundraiser for the school. Yeah. And that's for fun. I said we used to come down to the museum for art class. Well, Charlie Pack and I would go to class together. He got very artistic. He's done paintings, and good paintings. He's very good. I never got that good, but we had good times with clay and paints and puppets and all that.
And you mentioned Helen Henley was...
She was the art teacher, Helen Henley, right. She had a daughter that was about my age who was quite into ballerina. I remember watching her dance. I had a good friend who went to Longfellow. We looked a good bit alike. Her name was Louie Harrison. And whenever St. Joe's would have a holiday, on some Saint's Day, it was a delight to go to Longfellow with her, just to go through the day and see how their school was so much different than our school. And I remember Helen Henley's daughter, I can't think of her first name anymore, but they must have had some type of talent show, and she was very beautiful in her little ballerina outfit.
Is there anything else you remember about the museum?
The museum, I remember coming down and seeing Oscar the skeleton, and there was a man named Albert Heiss, I think. He was really I think he might have been the curator there, but he would tell us tales and make us feel welcome there. He was a nice man.
Did he ever play the Regina music box for you?
I don't remember that. I just remember Oscar the skeleton. I
He's-
remember the music box.
He's still here, Oscar. He's on this level.
Well,
Yeah.
I should go see him again. Say hello. Probably got me started in nursing. Look at those bones. Wonder how they go together.
That's great. Did you ever go skating or swimming at the Resi?
I've done that, but I have very weak ankles, and I would go, but I would just get frozen and get so tired of falling and getting up again. My favorite place would be around a barrel of fire, and I just think I froze my feet once up there. They were really numb for, I think, a day or two. I could get cold very easy, even as a child. But so I didn't go that often. I had skates, but I liked the fire the best. I used to do a lot of crack the whip when we were kids. Everybody get in the line. The last person was really at their mercy how far you'd go flying. I remember that. My children used to go to the reservoir because we lived not too far from there as we grew our family, my own family. And they all had skates. They went down. They always waited to get the report as to how thick the ice was before they were allowed to go. I remember that. Mm-hmm.
So you said you went to St. Joseph's
Parish.
Parish.
In school.
Was that all throughout school, or did you end up going to the high school here in Massillon?
No, you went 8 years at St. Joe's. It was a real old school up on top of a hill, and the whole backyard was nothing but cinders because they burned coal in those days. And you were supposed to go out and play on those cinders. And every time you come back, you had all these lacerations in your knees from falling on cinders out there. And eventually, they had a playground for the boys that was across the street, and theirs was blacktop, and they used to play a lot of football and baseball. But we were kind of stuck on the cinder hill. The girls were. I always wanted to be a boy in grade school. I thought I wanted to be an altar boy, and I wanted to be a traffic patrol boy, and I wanted to deliver newspapers, all of which were forbidden in the 40s. But now I see girls doing the traffic. My granddaughter, God bless her, is an altar girl at St. Joan of Arc, and girls a lot of times take papers. I used to walk with the different boys in our class that did paper routes. I walked with Charlie all through Fremont Avenue and Oak Street, and I used to walk with Pokey Converse through, his route was up near my house, but I just thought it was, and my brother had a route. I used to go with him. David would spend all his money. There were little stores along the way, a shell shop and a Jackman's drugstore. And when he'd collect, we would have snacks here and buy shells there. I don't think he made much money. We had a good time. I think when my older son, Tim, became a paper boy, we lived up on 19th Street. And they were two boys, and they were so opposite. Tim was, I don't know, he was walking to his own drum beat, and Kevin was just the opposite. He was always kind of afraid of people somewhat, and he didn't like collecting at all. So he wouldn't collect for months, and Tim would finally end up saying, well, I'll collect, but I get a percentage. Tim was always the moneymaker, you know. And when Tim would be working on his bike, and I keep saying, those papers, why don't I get them delivered? And he would just kind of say, yeah, but Kevin was always right out there doing the papers. I think the funniest one is Tim had a dog, Daisy, and Daisy would walk with him down 19th Street. And of course, a paper boy would be tempted to walk across the yards to go to the next house rather than down all around. And this one man was so always riding Tim's case about the dog walking across his yard and blah, blah. And this one time Tim went to his house and he told him he wasn't going to pay because the paper didn't come or something. And Tim just took his card and just ripped it in half, says, that's okay, mister, you don't need to be my customer. He come home, you didn't do that. Said, yeah, I did, Mom, I'm tired of him. I don't need his business. He said. So that was the end of that grumpy man. God bless him. He was a funny one.
Oh boy. St. Joseph's Parish, so you went
8 years there.
8 years.
Graduated in 48.
Okay.
Big class of 24 of us. One of them's a priest at Notre Dame, Tom Blantz. Charlie Packley became the doctor. Tommy Moore became an administrator in education. Let's see, what else do we have? A lot of interesting people, how we all grew up. One of them got involved with, I think, finances in Cincinnati, is Bob Hoficker. One of them became a nun, Dorothy Sarashine, a Dominican nun. I'm trying to think who else. They were just a nice group. We were very, I think, a Catholic school, but it was rather strict, and the students kind of bonded tight together, more so than today, I think. It was just us against the nuns, so to speak. So we would, I mean, they were good to us. They weren't mean or anything. We didn't have any mean nuns, really, but I think it was a tight bond. When I meet somebody that went to school in the 8th grade, you just feel like you're back in the 8th grade when you see them. It's kind of cute. We may have a reunion for my high school. For sure, we're due for one in 2012, so we're making plans for that now. And then the grade school one, I think they're having a big everybody class at St. Joe's. Is going to be this summer, I think. So we're getting the addresses of people who went to St. Joe's and invite them all. That's just come down to the church hall and they have, just a simple dinner, nothing elaborate like a restaurant or anything, but it's just kind of fun to see the people. It really is.
Yeah. What year did you graduate?
Grade school was 48, high school was 52.
So after you graduated high school, what did you go on to college?
Well, I did. I did enter the convent, and I was a nun for about 8 years, Sisters of Charity up in Cleveland. And that was interesting. And they sent me to college to become a nurse. And I really I really didn't know if I wanted teaching or nursing, and I told them that. But they decided to send 4 of our group to nursing. In those days, the 4-year programs were rather scarce, collegiate programs. Not too many people were going in. I graduated at St. John College in '59. And it was a lot of fun experiences. It was none. Traipsing around the cities, working at the big charity hospital, having the dogs underneath our living quarters that they were doing research on for open heart surgery. They developed the first heart-lung machine there. Again, that was probably in the about 57 or 8, that would have been. And we worked at Cleveland Clinic as students. It was a great experience. It opened your eyes to a lot of on the cutting edge of medicine, so to speak, to be in the big city. When I came to Massillon, I kept looking for specialists. I said, well, what does he specialize in? And they said, oh, he's a general practitioner. And I have not been introduced to general practitioners. When I was at Cleveland Clinic, there was a urologist and, respiratory was a specialty. But in Massillon, the doctors, they began to become specialized as I worked there in the 60s. But in the early 60s, in fact, they still were not too many specialists. I might be an OB man. Most of the OB were separate, but they didn't have urologists and, just the ones that you see now is that you would go to a specialist. But those days, they did everything. They delivered babies and took care of pneumonia. And, they were family doctors. They were good. It was a new, it just was new to see it done that way, I think. But it was good.
How long were you at the Cleveland Clinic?
Well, I just went there as a student. I didn't live there. I lived at Charity Hospital. When we were nuns, we lived there. And we went to school at St. John College. And we had a bus all over the city, out to Sunny Acres. We'd take 2 buses in the morning to go to where we were getting our nursing experience. My friend used to say we're going to get 2 credits for busology. It's true.
So when you graduated from St. John's College, what was the title of your degree that you came in with?
We just became, I had your Bachelor of Science in Nursing, BSN.
And so how did you end up back?
Well, after about 8 years, I decided this is a pretty lonesome life. I just I enjoyed it, but I just didn't think I could do it all my life. So I came home, and right away I went down to get a job at Massillon City Hospital then. And they said, oh, you got your degrees, you should go over to the School of Nursing. So I said, okay, we'll go to the School of Nursing. And it was a wonderful opportunity to teach student nurses. I wasn't that much older than they were. I was probably like about 25. Not a huge amount of age difference between the students that came in. And that was great. We had a 3-year diploma school. And Miss Barbara Murdy's was the director. And I think she had just started maybe a year or so before I came. And it was simple. We had like about 3 classrooms, a big library, and about 6 offices for the instructors. And then the students lived up on the 2nd and 3rd floor of the Howelstein home. And they were the kind of students that were a delight to teach. They all came because they wanted to be nurses. They were kind of salt of the earth people. A lot of them came from places like Millersburg and Charm and those kind of places. And they just were wonderful students. And you asked them to jump, they didn't ask why. They just said, how high? Because they just were there to do their best and hang in. And they had, ups and downs, which any student has. And if I saw somebody getting down, I'd say, let's take a ride in my car. I'd just take them for a long ride, and we'd talk about what was bothering them. And I think if they just got some of this stuff out of their system, they'd go back with, yep, I can hang in here. And I always tease them now, if you're going to pack up, you come and tell me first. Then I'd laugh, I'll help you pack. But I think it was really a privilege to work with that many, 26 years of students. That was fun.
26 years, wow.
It was fun. I've had mothers and daughters. I thought I'd get the granddaughters, but that didn't happen. They closed the school. In '86, they closed the school. But it was a very nice way they did it. Some schools just closed, like at Mercy, that was it. But at our school, they let us continue with the students we had in the school. Well, luckily, I taught seniors, so I was there till the last end, but after a certain time, they wouldn't take any more freshmen, and the last 3 years moved through, which was nice. And it's amazing how much our students have spread their wings. A couple of them, well, one of them became a doctor, and it was Nicolaitis Vicky, was a great student. A lot of them are directors of nursing homes and hospitals. It's just amazing. We had 4 boys in 1 year that were a fun addition to the class. They did well. And I think, to my knowledge, I think 2 or 3 of those 4 boys have passed away, which really shocked me. We get an alumni organization, and I get their letter, and I'm just so shocked how many young students have passed away that I had. I just can hardly believe that. But they do. Young people. But it was fun. In those days, there was a close bond between the school nursing and the hospital. Mr. Zucker was awful good to our school, and Barbara could go over and tell them we needed this or that, and they would always be congenial. It changed a lot as the years went on. The hospitals became more money-oriented, I think. Before, the kids would go to the ER and they'd be taken care of if they cut themselves or had a bad cold or sore throat. But after a while, it was, well, where's your insurance? You know, I never did that before. When I first started, when Mr. Zucker was in charge, that was the day before DRGs and all the other alphabets that meant bring money in. But it was, I mean, you just adjusted to it. It wasn't made you want to quit or anything, but you just saw the change as things went on.
Do you think it changed for the better or worse, or?
It probably was good and bad changes. I liked it wasn't quite so mercenary. You wouldn't think of a hospital advertising in the 50s or 60s, you know. It wasn't cutthroat. They were kind of working together with other hospitals. But as eventually it came on, there was just a lot of, I thought, the nice part was, you know, doctors was out there, and at one point in time, very early 60s, their doctors were not considered as good as the regular doctors. But as time went on, a couple of them joined the staff, Dr. Seth Brown and a few others, I think Vogelsang, and they began to realize these doctors, they actually had a better bedside manner, and they knew that they were good with their patients. To the point now where they're in grade, all the hospitals have the doctors from Doctors Hospital, and I felt bad in a way when they closed their place, because out they were doing quite well there. I don't know how that's going to come out. It was back and forth. First the hospital was going to be there, and then it was back at Massillon. And I think it caused a lot of hurt feelings. I wasn't there for the real invasion of the doctor's crew, but they kind of came in from people I knew well. They felt that they kind of had the advantage. The doctors, people got in the power position, so to speak. And a lot of them quit. I used to work, even though I worked full-time at Mercy, I would still work weekends at Massillon for a long time. And I really enjoyed seeing the people I had known. Some of my students were in charge of floors by then. And I would work 3 to 11 because my daughter was in college then. And trying to think, I liked coming there, and then all of a sudden when these new doctors people were taking charge, and they started to tell me, well, now you have to work every other weekend. And I said, listen, I'm already working every other weekend at Mercy. There's no way I'm giving up 4 weekends a month. Well, they just kind of were real curt and just said, well, we're terminating you. I said, well, rather than terminate, let me resign, because I don't like my record to say I was terminated. But it was fun. I probably did that maybe 10 years of part-time. I like to be like a pinch hitter. They needed, like on a weekend, or sometimes I even worked both shifts. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed seeing the people that I knew as patients, you know, taking care of those. That was fun. But when they wanted every other weekend, I said, I don't think I can do that. I got a little bit of social life left. It takes place on the weekends. But 311 was a nice shift. I'm a little nocturnal person, and I liked working 311. And so when the school closed, then I went over to Mercy in '86. And I was in education for about a year, you know, doing in-service and orientation to new nurses. taking them on the floor, taking these college grads. In those days, they did not get much experience. And I hate to tell you, I don't think they get too much experience even now, because our girls were on the floor a lot more. And we had a check-off list. And every procedure, they had to show they could do it without mistake. Like to do a catheterization, do trach care, chest tubes, all that was on this big 3-page list. And when these girls came from the college programs and I was supposed to be orienting them, I'd give them a paper, but they hadn't had it done. And there was more things they hadn't done than what they had done. They had never done a catheterization. They had never taken care of chest tubes. And so I got to play the instructor role. I put a beeper on and we'd go through the hospital and I'd teach them how to do IVs. They had never had that. And I'd talk to my friends who had gone to teach at the collegiate programs. I said, don't you have these return demos with us? Oh, well, we show them a 15-minute video on catheterizations. You expect them to 6 months later remember how to do a sterile technique without ever doing. So not a lot of schools do have labs now. They have got back to the old-fashioned lab that we always had. But they still graduate, I know they do, with not ever done many rather common procedures that one should know how to do. They learn a lot their first year out of collegiate programs when they get to the floor. And it's the old-timers teaching them how to do it, I think. But our students, it was going back to the 3-year program, there was, we'd have like about, I'd say 20, we'd start with about 29, 30, and we'd probably graduate about 25. We'd lose a few along the way. I always felt very bad when we'd lose somebody. It really would depress me. And when they graduated, I would get kind of depressed. Because, you know, you got so used to seeing them in school, and then you'd see a third of them over in white uniforms working, and that was kind of compensation. But I missed the ones that I had known so well. Every year I'd go through a little downtime when they graduated and left. But they would, we were into old-fashioned traditions. They weren't allowed to wear slacks at all, and that was hard. I think because the other schools, they were not as, Miss Murray's ran a tight ship, which was all right. They laugh about it, but in a way, when they get ready to look for another job, I say, listen, if you got through this program, you could take on any job. You could go to Cleveland Clinic and be ready to go because you've been brought up with a lot of discipline. And they were not to wear earrings on the floor. And they, what some of them did, they used to bus them. When they were freshmen, they'd bus them either to Akron University or I think we went to Kent for a while. And the kids would take slacks. And when they get on the bus they would change and get their skirts off because they didn't like be the only girls walked around campus with skirts on and kind of marked them out as they were the ones from Massillon, you know. But it was funny, but they had tight rules, and I'm trying to think of some of the other rules they had that were, you know, they had a tight curfew. They had to be in. There was a house mother checking them in, and they had to be in at a certain time. And at first, they stayed a lot of weekends there. And when we had a big snowstorm or something, the students were just delighted to go over there and help out. And there was no question that they wouldn't want to do it. They just looked forward to that being part of the hospital. But I've talked to some, in fact, I work with some collegiate. I went out to one of the schools, I won't name, and helped for one semester teaching. And they had a lot of, they weren't the same kind of students. They were a lot of married students. They had such different excuses for why they weren't where they were supposed to be. They had to go to court for their divorce proceedings, or all these different things that I wasn't used to with my young students. They like I say, they were so much more moldable. These other collegiate students, they had this phrase stamped on their forehead, "Do not use me for service." And I used to say, you know, that's how you learn, is getting out there doing it again and again. Oh, don't use me. They were told, don't let them use you for service. But that wasn't the feel at Massillon. It was we were used for service, and it was a learning service. It was good. It was very good. But, and I was on a psych unit. They sent me some students from one of the nearby nursing colleges, and I was giving out assignments. And I asked this one student if she would go take the vital signs of all the patients. And she looked at me and said, I don't need that experience. I know how to do vitals. I said, well, have you ever done them on psychiatric patients? It's a whole new game. You can go try it once. But they were just so worried that somebody just might use them for service. And it was not a good attitude, I didn't think. A lot of them were in it just because they thought it was it's not that well paying, but they thought it was a steady paying job. Whereas I think the students I was used to were more for wanting to take care of people, not so much the the paycheck at the end, I guess. I was looking, I had a paycheck, I think it was my very first one, and that would have been like in 60. And for 2 weeks, I think I was paid $120. And I thought, that was big, my money was big money, but that's what it was. Now students or nurses get probably about 10 times that. It's a changing of times, But it's just kind of funny. We did it because there was a lot of fun, a lot of humor in it. When the kids would graduate, they used to do a little stunt, like a presentation, or what would you want to call it, make fun of the faculty, which was, it was fun. I mean, they weren't mean, they were just funny, And this one, I used to work students hard. I have to say I did that. And I had this one girl who was exceptionally good, and I'd give her the hardest patients and keep her busy. And she got up and she says, well, this is my assignment from Mrs. McConnell. And she had this paper all folded up and kind of it unfolded all the way down to the floor like this long list. But she's the one that became a doctor because I could see a lot of potential. If I saw potential, it got worked out. I mean, I liked everybody to do their fair square. I had this one girl, I gave her a treatment card to do a cath or something. And I'm there on the floor all morning with them. We had to leave around 11 to go to conference. She gets up about 10 to 11 and says, I didn't have time to do this catheterization. And I said, well, we're not leaving until you get that done because I hate people who just don't get done what they're expected. That would bother me. I hate the people. I just hate the fact that somebody would come and say, well, I didn't have time to do this. Well, we're going to do it right now. And we did, And I always tell students, when you walk in, act like you've done this 7 times before. Do not act like it's your first time. Because it would bother me. Every now and then you get a student who wanted sympathy from the patient. I've just never done this before. Don't ever do that in front of me. So they learn. That was one of my pet peeves. Say, I've never done this before. You act like we've done this. We go and do IVs together. One time we did an IV in the emergency room. And this girl had a pair of scissors and she was cutting the tape. She'd got the IV out. She was taping it over. And she had these pair of scissors. And didn't she cut through the line on the IV, cutting the tape? It was a real thin little line that would attach to a butterfly. And I just kind of reached over and took this tube and just kind of flipped it over real quick so we didn't have blood all over the place. And I said, I think we better start this again. So we just kind of act like nothing unusual happened. I didn't like patients ever feel like they were getting a bad deal. I just said, maybe we better start this again. So we like it was all part of the procedure, slipped this one out and went to another one to come back. Be careful with your scissors, lady. Just different things. And, I tried to be nice to students. I really did. I think I was the one that would make allowance for them, try to make things easier for them. Not easier, not slacking off, but I mean that they would feel they were making progress, like to always feel, boy, you did a great job on this or that. And that was good. It was a long time ago. And then I was starting to tell you they made this fun of this program. Well, then, at that time, Troop and Pluto would give us a big composite of everybody's graduation picture. And the students definitely, and they would give them to us free. And I'd take them to this little scenario where they would tease about the faculty, which was okay. It was good for them to get that out of their system. And then I'd say, all right, I have these nice composite pictures, and in order to get one, you've got to tell me something that somebody did that we never knew about. And that got to be the funniest session. They'd talk about how they sneaking in the basement windows and just different fun things, how they were copying each other's care sheets, or care plans we used to call them. It just we had a lot of good laughs. They could say it then. They were going to graduate the next day. It was the things they had done. I used to be in charge of the health clinic. And I did that for almost 26 years. And they would come down if they were sick. A lot of dysmenorrhea in those days, okay. But a lot of them had the flu. And I would be like 6, 8 months pregnant. I'm climbing up to the 3rd floor to take tea and toast to these people that had the flu. I don't think I caught on for 26 years. These kids had been down to Pokies. They really had hangovers. And I was thinking that they were poor kids. Really, I didn't know much into drinking. I never would have put that together until they told me one of those times about their escapades where they would go down to Pokey's bar. Pokey was one of my classmates at St. Joe's too. And Pokey was there. Pokey Converse, he was a nice fellow. He's the one I said I delivered papers with.
Where was his bar?
It was on Amherst Road, just about 2 blocks from the hospital. I think it was called Pokey's, and I don't even know what's even there anymore. I don't think it's there. Another thing we used to do as student nurses, Barbara Burdies was very prim and proper, and she wanted all these girls to learn proper etiquette. So once a month we would go down to the women's club, and that was kind of a fun show. And they would serve them dessert and tea, and they would have lectures on proper apparel and etiquette. And the kids used to tease about a lot, but I think it really was probably beneficial to them to learn, because a lot of them came from way out in the boonies, and it was just good for them to learn what was expected, so to speak. That was Miss Birdie's idea, but it was a good idea, I think. I don't think we did that right to the end. It got to be a little pricey, I think, but it was, there were a number of years the kids would kid about, remember our etiquette classes? They would kid about it. These alumni, they have twice a year they have a meeting, a party I should say, or social. In the spring they meet out at Papa Bear's lately. And they'll have like about, I'd say 80 or 90 alumni come, which is really fun. And they usually give a scholarship to somebody who's related to one of the nurses. And then the Christmas time they go to the Women's Club, which kind of brings back memories of when they were there for their etiquette classes. But we have a big dinner at Christmas time there. We'll be going, I think it's this Saturday, in fact. It is this. I think it's tomorrow. Mm-hmm. I'm going to that. And they send a newsletter out, and it's always nice to hear what different people are doing.
Would you mind if I gave you some of my cards? Because leading up to this centennial of the School of Nursing, I would love to speak with
the students. Get their point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be
I
great.
could give you lots of names. A lot of them are still in town here.
Okay. That'd be great. We can talk after.
Okay.
Okay.
So what else to tell you about the school?
Let's see, Barbara Murdy's. I've briefly met her, and
No, she ran a good school. She did, and we had a lot of traditions. Like when they finished their freshman year, we would cap them, and we do it in a church, one of the churches in town, and they would always have their choir. They had a student choir then, and they would sing beautiful songs like "Climb Every Mountain" or "I Believe," or just that was their class song. And then when they receive a cap, they'd invite half of Massillon would come, I think. And it was just very pretty with candlelight and all. And then at the same ceremony, the juniors would get a black stripe on their cap. And they would they all had big sisters, and their big sisters would put the band on and give them a kiss on the cheek, and they would kneel down. It was a very religious type of thing, really. It was very nice. And then when they graduated, they would have a very nice graduation in one of the churches again, and they would sing, and it was just very impressive. It made you think, gee, I wish I would have gone to that school. It was just very impressive. And then we had a yearbook, and I think for 26 years I was the advisor for the yearbook. And that was fun, because we took a lot of pictures, and we always have a different theme in the book. I think you have some books down here. And I'd usually end up working with the two editors, or however the organization was set up every year. And I remember the man coming, and those days, if the contract was for about $1,500, that was a big amount of money. And we just hoped we were going to make it, and we'd send letters out to all the doctors on the staff. And they were very generous to us. They'd send us a check. In those days, $50 or around that number was good money for us. And then we would in turn give a book to their waiting room. And those books would be around in waiting rooms for years and years. You know, people enjoyed looking through them for somebody they went to school with, or their aunt or somebody. But it was fun doing the yearbooks. I enjoyed that. I was frustrated because in high school we were forbidden to have a yearbook. And that really frustrated me as a high school student. So when they said, do you want the yearbook? I said, I would love to do the yearbook, because I was just kind of compensating. But it was a challenge every year to get it there on time, calling people and getting photographers that would kind of pinch in for us if we were missing some pictures. And it was a nice book. Everybody had their graduation picture in there, but we caught a lot of cute candids of life in the dorm. They used to have a washing machine, a pool table, and a jukebox in the basement at Howenstein home. And a lot of kids didn't go home for the weekends at first. Toward the end, the last 10 years, everybody barreled out of there. No matter where they were going, they were going to be there for the weekend. But at first, it was just a different environment. They expected to come, expected to stay. It was good. When you give a class lecture, if you were going over material and if you just made the phrase, this might be on the test, write that down real quick. And it was, I mean, they had to learn these things. It was important. We'd lose some girls on grades. It always made me feel bad, but most of them were doing their best. They really were. So what else I can tell you about the school? Nice faculty, good people, real dedicated people. They would be there for long hours, and we'd have meetings sometimes on Saturday to go over, get ready for a thing called NLN, National League for Nurses. And they would come around and credit your school. I swear it seemed like every 2 or 3 years they were coming around again. And you'd spend so much time doing all this paperwork that you thought they were, and they were going to look at it, they were, you know. And they would come, interview the students, and look at all your records. And you didn't want to have too many, your attrition rate was looked at. If you lost a lot, it looked like something was not quite right with the school. We never had a problem with that. Our attrition rate was not that high. But getting ready, it was just a stressful thing. Hospitals do it now when their creditors are coming around. I used to always say, I think it'd be better if they would just come, but you didn't know it. Then you'd really see a true picture. Otherwise, people spent 3 months pulling their hair out, trying to make everything look so perfect. And now I understand. In the hospital, I went through that working at both hospitals. Oh, the accreditors are coming, exact date, exact time, you know. We knew. But now someone told me that the deal is that they come unexpected. I said, I am so glad. It takes a lot of stress off everybody, and it gives a real picture. But probably they stress all year getting ready for their unexpected visit. But I like it better that way, I think. We never had trouble. We always were accredited to school. Miss Birdie's made sure we all look good. And she wanted all of us to go back to school. And that was difficult. You're working full time, you're raising a family, but eventually I got down to one child. I went back to Akron and got my master's in technical education, which was a little easier than the nursing one. Nursing one, you had to go out, spend hours in the field, which I didn't have that much time free. So I got the master's in tech education, which really teaching in school nursing was a lot of technical education with doing things with your hands. I came to my own belief that you have learning cells in your hands, and you learn through things that you handle and touch. And if I would do a presentation on how we're going to do a cath or chest tubes, I'd bring all the equipment in and let everybody handle it a whole lot. And then we talk about how it's used, and then we do the lab on it. But I just think that they learn through your hands. If something clicks up there, I felt this, I know how it goes. You know. But if you just come in cold and just say, well, this is how we do this, and it just, I think you learn by doing, is my thought. So, what else can I tell you about the school? We probably graduated about 24 every year. And most of them went on to all varieties of nursing. Some became nurse anesthetists. I think 3 or 4 did that. Some, I just see them in all phases. But nowadays, when I run into them at these get-togethers, I say, where are you working now? Oh, I'm retired. And I just laugh. And I say, what do you mean you're retired? She was, every year we gave a special award. It was called the Miss Caducean Award. And that was in the yearbooks. And you'd have 2 runners-up. And it was kind of kept real secret. And I think the student body voted for each one of their class who they wanted to get the award. And every year we'd get we had their graduation picture, but we'd catch them like standing at the emergency room desk or on a floor. And then we'd have everything written up really nice about why this person was the Miss Caducean. And at first we used to give trophies, and we'd have a big assembly for it, but it didn't happen until the very end when the yearbook came out. Senior week, they called it. And after a while, I said to myself, you know, trophies are kind of dust collectors. And I thought, it would really be nice to give them a jewelry box with this metal, silver end plate of their picture and their name and the date and all that. So I started buying jewelry boxes, and that was a nicer present, I thought, that they could use. But we had some great girls come, too, who were the Miss Caduceans and the 2 runners-up. And they were always surprised. The ones that would win would be so surprised. And it would come out at graduation. We'd announce it and give them their jewelry box, roses, big armful of roses.
That's great.
It was nice. There was something else I thought of as far as the students. You see, like a lot of students would get one buddy that would be their support system through the program. And if you saw one, you always saw two, certain people who always were together. I mean, that's normal. I mean, they weren't isolating, they weren't not nice to the rest, but most people had a buddy roommate that they kind of shared their ups and downs with, and that was good to see. A lot of them remind me of MASH movie. One of my favorite programs is MASH. And there was always a couple schemers who were always playing tricks just to keep the humor good. You know, these two were on the elevator with me, and the elevator stopped, and they knew the maintenance people. They were young fellows in those days, and they would hop off and pull their buckets in the elevator, and just hide things on each other, just little tricky things. I think, you rascals, he's going to be looking all over for this bucket. It's just so funny. But just little cute things they would do. I remember I was asked to be on the safety committee, and the safety committee would meet for lunch about once a month, and they'd go over all the incident reports at the hospital of people who had fallen or wrong medicines given or whatever the incident was. And I remember I would go, and we'd listen to this, and we tried to take remedial measures, of course. Okay, so this one day I'm not feeling really good, but I'm going to this meeting, and I thought, I'm going to have a cup of tea before I go out. Maybe I'll feel better. So I was making this tea, and then someone said, do you know what time it is? You should have been there 5 minutes ago. So I run over to the meeting, and we're sitting there eating lunch, and all of a sudden I hear the sirens coming. The fire department is coming. And it just hits me, that tea kettle, I never turned it off, And that's what they were up for. I felt so embarrassed. I'm at the safety committee meeting. This is going to be an incident next month about the fire. It wasn't any fire, but there wasn't any whistle on it. Usually there was a whistle on this thing. And it just kind of burnt dry and had a bad odor, which set the alarms off. But that was so funny. I thought, here I am in the safety committee. I'm causing the fire department to move across the driveway. It was funny.
So where was the school located? On hospital grounds, or?
It's that big Houndstein building right across the driveway.
Okay.
And I was going to think, during senior week, these kids had a lot of fun. They would decorate the Houndstein home. Most of the time, they would take crepe paper and make bars on the windows, And they would go out where there was a gate where the doctors would come in and out, and they'd have a great big sign on there that would say, behind every good doctor is a great nurse. Just this stuff would be all over, and then the last day they'd sign each other's uniforms. They had those stiff white aprons over their blue dresses, and they'd come back with everybody's signature would be all over their uniforms. It was funny. Sometimes Miss Murdy's didn't like that part. They did it anyhow. That time he figured it was the day or two before graduation. They had a lot of traditions. The kids were very tightly bonded, I would say. At least the first 10, 15, 20 years when I started in the 60s. Then we started getting some married students, which Barbara would refer to as the non-traditional students. Now at the colleges, I think that there's more non-traditional than there are kids out of high school, but it was fun. Learning is so much fun, I think. When you get an IV going the first time and you come out and you look at that student and you just feel like, we did it, got that one, landed that one. And it was just very satisfying to see them mature and learn to do things, do them right. It was fun. Sometimes certain patients would be there for a long time. Those days you spend a long time. You don't do that now. 2 days you're out the door. But anyhow, we'd go around with the beeper and do all the IVs. And one man started to see that we came in quite well. And he said, well, here comes Dracula and her daughter. And I said, yeah, here we are. Yeah, that was fun, but they did learn. We used to have a thing called butterflies. They don't use butterflies much anymore, but they were like a needle with little plastic wings. And that's how you started your IVs. Toward my end of, I think the school was closed, they started coming like angio-calves. And they're like a needle with a plastic sheath on the top. And it's probably better because you put it in and then you pull the needle out, and it's only this little plastic cannula inside the vein, which tends not to infiltrate as much as a sharp needle would. But when we were in the butterfly stage of these, when we graduated one year, the students got together and made this great big butterfly, big fuzzy butterfly. That was my present for having taught them how to use those butterflies. Yeah. A lot of changes came in the hospital. It was just, at one point we used to teach team leading. I don't think they even do that. We used to teach how a leader would have like certain people on our team, so many aides, so many LPNs, so many RNs, and you were just almost like a combat war, a zone, not that you had that feeling, but you were in charge, that the job all got done, and it took a lot of teamwork. And you would have team conferences at the end of the shift every day. If we was the students, we'd always have a conference ourselves. And one by one, I'd get them to tell what they learned or what they did. And that was a good way to share it, because some people might get more experience than somebody else. Or I'd take maybe an extra one in to watch so she could share with the experience. Did a lot of dressings on people, a lot of, it was hard to teach them how to keep everything sterile and not to break your sterile technique before you got the whole dressing on, because it's so tempting to reach for something when you have your glove. No, you don't want to do that. You have to get everything ready before you get your gloves on. It was like a game, teaching them how to play the game with the rules. And they enjoyed it. They did. I think most students were happy students in those days. I didn't have too many disgruntled students, I don't think. And some I still run into. But what else can I tell you about the school? They're going to tear it down, I'll tell you that.
Oh, goodness.
And probably about maybe 6 months ago, I lose track of time, 6, 7 months ago, the one class was celebrating their 25th anniversary from graduation. And they do keep track of each other now with Facebook and all. They can really keep track of each other. And they got together for a weekend down at some very nice Amish hotel type of place. And then they called the administrators up at the hospital, and they wondered if they could tour the Houndstein home before they tore it down. And they were very gracious, and they let us go in. And probably was about maybe 10, 12 of us in the group. They were all the same class. And Miss Murray's was just recovering from having hips. She had fractured a hip. This is in the last year. And I called her to tell her that the students were going to come through the home, and I wish it'd be nice if you felt up to it to come. And she kind of didn't give me a straight answer. So when we walked in the building, her office used to be the first door on the left. And I thought, wouldn't it be cute if she could be in that office? They would really laugh. But she wasn't there. So we were walking around, and I'm up on the 3rd floor, and the kids are saying, oh, remember we had the mailboxes here, and remember they were just redoing everything. And all of a sudden I heard her voice. By golly, she came, cane and all, and she was on the 2nd floor. And the kids got a big kick the fact that she joined them, And then they gave us a tour of the hospital, because for many of them had not seen all the changes. And then, of all things, we went down and they served us strawberry shortcake in the cafeteria, which was so neat because through the years they used to have a strawberry shortcake festival at the hospital. And the nurses, they go out to Horner's strawberry patches, and they'd pick quarts and quarts and quarts of strawberries, and they'd bring them back. And on the front lawn of the hospital, when the front was toward Amherst then, they would have all these, then they donated the ice cream. The kids all had these little aprons with strawberries on them, and they served great big strawberry shortcakes with ice cream. And it was a good moneymaker because everything was free for them. They just had to pick the strawberries. But we didn't do that for the last 10 years or so. That was more like in the beginning. It was fun. I don't know what else to tell you, that they were good students. And I get a delight out of running into some of them. At most unusual places, I'll go to a workshop out of town, and somebody comes and say, didn't you teach a Massillon? And I look at them, and usually I can remember their names. I'm amazed myself. I can usually remember, once in a while, if they start talking. Then they start talking, I know exactly who they are, because we all have such unique conversations. But they're good students. Most of them are grandmothers now, and they'll talk about their grandchildren in nursing. And I think I'm glad to hear that they're in it. And nurses are still good people. They're still out there helping. It's just there's a lot of changes. Like I said, good and bad.
Can I stop you for 1 second so I can change my tape?
Okay. Am I taking this too long?
No.